join link, YouTube. Reach out to us if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. More than happy to help however we can. You can ask questions in our Slack to get more rapid response, or also find our YouTube channel here. If there's any presentations you've seen or want to see in the past, we post all of our recordings there for reference for later, or if you just have any other things that you want to know about. We're also open to suggestions, or if you want to give a talk, feel free to reach out to any one of us and we can talk with you about that. Our schedule for today will be Fusion Development by Derrick. The 21st will be Azure Security 101 by Adrian, and then October 5th will be Data Factory and Power BI by Xeris. As always, if you want to learn some more Azure stuff for free, here's some links for you. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Derrick.
Awesome. Let me share out my screen here. If I can share out my screen. Seems like my computer's running really slow today.
You just wanted one more day of vacation?
No, I need to reboot it really, really bad. Everybody, let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to bore with some PowerPoints today, unfortunately, but so we're talking about Fusion development. What Fusion development really is, and if you have any questions during this presentation, I mean, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask questions, or we'll have some time at the end of the presentation for some Q&A, on and off recording if you like. So Fusion development is really trying to bring together citizen developers, IT developers, and pro developers. You might ask yourself, what is a citizen developer? So the citizen developer is somebody who their primary job is not doing development. They're not necessarily going to work in a language like C#, Java, Python, whatever. They're more of like the business end users that we're trying to empower to be able to create applications that they might need. In the past, we might have referred to this as shadow IT, but we're trying to bring that out of the shadows and into the forefront, and really foster cooperation between these groups to create a more agile environment. So some quick stats for you. Gartner reports, I think it was Gartner, reported that over 500 million new apps will be created within the next 5 years, more than all apps built in the last 40 years. Demand for mobile apps is growing at a 5x pace faster than IT can deliver. 85% of organizations struggle to analyze unstructured data, and 86% are struggling to find talent out there. With that said, 65% of enterprise application development will probably be in the low-code environment going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about low-code and low-code, no-code on this presentation also. So what does this have to do with Azure? So talking in a low-code, no-code environment, there's and trying to create that Fusion development environment, there's pieces within Azure that lend themselves to helping create that. So, and we'll walk through, but here's a few of the pieces that for overview. PowerApps is our low-code, no-code environment. If you've ever taken a look at that, it's extremely powerful environment for a no-code, low-code, always coming out with new features and functionality. Power Automate is that robotic process automation piece, being able to automate scripts and stuff. And then Power Virtual Agent, if you want to create chatbots for your websites and don't want to actually have to do the code, Power Virtual Agents is a way to do that through a low-code, no-code environment. And some of these Azure pieces you'll be familiar with also. Skip over that. So today we're going to be talking, here's, actually I jumped ahead this slide, but transforming business apps. Why this Fusion developments we talked about, it's not necessarily a technology piece, it's a concept of fostering collaboration between the basically developers, operations, to create that more agile environment. We're going to be kind of walking through a fake company today, Van Arsdale Heating and Air Conditioning. Kind of see, they've got problems with their growth. They're a fast growing company. A lot of paper-based processes at this point that they're trying to, it's causing a lot of delays and issues. So we'll kind of see how they use Fusion development to overcome some of that. So one thing, if you've ever listened to Satya Nadella talk, he talks about tech intensity, and it's really tech intensity is this organization, technology, individual, fostering trust within the organization, adoption of the technology, and creating the skilling to enable a company. In the past, most companies have treated IT and developers as more of a cost piece. In reality, it's becoming now with app innovation that all companies are a technology company. I'd be hard pressed to think of any business out there that doesn't rely on technology to have a competitive edge or even just run their day-to-day business. So the Fusion development teams is working on that collaboration. You got the ITs and the pros over here who have a lot of things to develop. We talk about agile processes, trying to stay on top of what's most important to the business. They're screaming for needing more help, not having time to develop applications, and then you have the business side of the coin out here. Just constant clamoring. They need reports and they need data input. All kinds of applications they want created, and then it's a common story. IT just doesn't have time. We don't have time to do it. So trying to create a collaboration between these to figure out a way around that. So here at Van Arsdale, they have a field inventory management system. Like I said, right now a lot of it's paper driven, and they're trying to figure out a way to automate that. Skip ahead on some of this. So, part of that is using a low code environment. So within our PowerApps platform, it actually has a language of its own called PowerFX. Think of PowerFX as kind of an Excel scripting language. It is strongly typed, general purpose, declarative functional programming language. So it is extremely powerful. So while a lot of things can be done with drag and drop, you can enhance the application through this PowerFX language. And we'll show a little bit of that today also. For PowerApps is a suite of technologies like I showed before. You have connectors into other systems that you can create. You can connect into. There's like 350 different connectors built in, and then you can also extend that through calling out to APIs. I'll show having an API out within my Azure environment running on app service, and then using API management as to front end that. I'm going to bore with low code, no code. I think that's pretty self-explanatory for this group. This deck's actually meant for a general purpose deck. So creating your first application. Go out. Let me pull this up. So here's the Van Arsdale application that I've created. If I were to run this is within the Power Platform portal. If I were to run this, it comes up this. Now you see this form factor is actually meant for a mobile application. So I can install the PowerApps platform on my mobile device, my phone or tablet, even it would run in this mode, but it gives me a mobile app at that point for my field staff to be able to use. I can go out here and be able to see what parts I have in stock, be able to pull up my parts. I can go to my knowledge base and actually search my knowledge base and be able to find, if I have a question out there. So we'll go a little bit behind behind the scenes on this, but here's, you have different screens that you can be able to use with your Power Apps. So here's my knowledge base one. So this is what my knowledge base screen looks like. Within here, you've got, the different components that I can click on, that can change. I can put whatever, drag and drop things on here to design. So that's just a high level overview of what PowerApps. I'm not going to get too hung up on what PowerApps is today. This is more about, connecting PowerApps into what the Azure backend would look like for this. Any questions on PowerApps? PowerApps also has a component language to it, that you can create components for within this also, and that would take more of a professional developer to create those components for PowerApps. So that would give you it's got a PowerApps component framework. It gives you a testing and debugging environment. Creating, rolling out code for your citizen developers to use that's been fully tested at that point. And then to extend it further, I mean, I talked a little bit, touched briefly on some of the connectors that PowerApps has. One of those is creating connectors into OpenAPI. So as part of this project that I did for the fictitious Van Arsdale company, I actually created, I actually have an app service out here that I created. You see that here's all the controllers for my app service. This has actually been deployed already to my Azure portal. Get my just a standard API controller here that that we would see deployed into the an app service. So if I look at my Azure backend, I've actually got my resource group here created already. So these are components I've deployed out to my Azure resource group. So here's where my API is currently deployed. And if you look at the OpenAPI for that, this is what the OpenAPI looks like for my APIs. Now, don't take this as a proper way to do an API. I kind of throwing the kitchen sink into everything to be able to use. More than likely, you would break these out into individual components, even a microservice architecture at some point. Now, for my app, though, I would come in here and I would create a custom connector. I apologize for my machine running really slow. I'd come in and create, open from a URL. And then to my JSON. Paste it in there. Import it. Oh, interesting. I thought I had version 2. So this is one of the traps of the PowerApps import for the connectors. It wants OpenAPI 2, and default in Visual Studio's project is doing API version 3. I thought I had change that though within my startup. But so basically that's why I already have it deployed. So here's my connector that it created. And from here, I would actually create a connection from this connector. And all a connection is actually passing the authentication for this connector to create the actual connection for it. So at this point, I needed, any API key that I was using, or any authorization if I, have it authenticating against, say, Azure Active Directory or AAD B2C, would pass that into it and create the connector at this point. So when I go back to my app, be able to see right here, field engineer API connection is getting called, getting schedule engineering appointments to bring back based on the date. So that's creating a connector into my API I just deployed and being able to use it from within this PowerApps. So, a citizen developer would be able to create this, be able to call your API that your software engineers created on the back end, and include that information within their environment. Now, the one thing I guess I skipped over is that my API is actually running, it's actually calling API management services. And that's actually probably where my problem was. Because I'm actually running it from within API management. So I have an API gateway front-ending my web API. And even from within here, from within the API management, I can actually do an export. And that's actually what I did. I exported an OpenAPI v2 from here, but I can actually export from within here also to my, where is it? It's not in here. Should be able to export actually out into my PowerApp environment and then automatically create the connector for me. I think what I did is I just downloaded the JSON from my API gateway and then imported it in from a file. Any questions on creating that connector for the PowerApps? Hopefully I'm not losing everybody on this so far.
So a connector is your shared, or whatever data source, right? It doesn't need to be an API, it could be anything.
Correct. You could have a connector directly into a SQL database. So I have, I chose the route. So here's the SQL database that I'm using. I actually have 3 databases. I have a inventory database, a knowledge database, and a schedule database. So I could have a SQL connector directly into these databases. I chose to go the route of using an API, trying to use, proper guidance on, allowing allowing non-IT to access my backend environments. Because, we've probably all seen those situations where database schema changes, and if I've got, Excel spreadsheets, access databases, whatever, accessing those databases directly, I change the schema, those apps can break. But if I go through an API, that API can always return the same JSON to the whatever the front end is, or I can mask it, or I can have a separate version of that API that can kind of mask those details on how that's actually accessing data, or how that data gets returned at that point. So it's just a way to basically bulletproof or future-proof my backend services by not allowing people direct access. Plus, it controls how and who can access my backend services also. So if I set up APIs, I can turn off a single API if I don't want them to access it, or I can rate limit that API, or I can, from API management, I can actually change the data getting returned without actually have to go back and modifying the API on the back end of it. So, API management gateway is an extremely powerful environment to be able to use. So, you know, between authorizations, manipulation, caching, whatever, it's highly encouraged for people to use API gateways in front of their APIs.
So is the API the granularity that Microsoft usually recommends for connectors?
Yes, for the most part. I mean, typical architect, it depends, but for the most part, most things we do, we try to encourage to use an API management just to give you that added control over it. So, if you need to make changes, you can change the whole API back in without, and you can remap APIs. You can, like I said, change data, how data goes to or from the API. I can turn on caching. It gives me automatic authentication through a key or calling out to AAD for authentication. So it gives me much better control using an API management gateway.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Let me see, where was I? So that covers the API, and that's how the application itself is pulling a lot of data in through this API. So anytime I go in, I grab my parts list. This is actually coming into calling my API, coming out to my database, and grabbing my inventory to see what's in there. So the next piece I did is actually on back up is actually on the knowledge base. So within the SQL database I have on the back end, I have this knowledge base database. And so there's a lot of, tips and information in here. So, I wanted to be able to surface that out to end users to be able to, do searches on. So one of the things I did is I created a Azure Cognitive Service. There's my cognitive service, and all this cognitive service is doing is going out. I had it indexing the SQL database, and then I actually created a connector for this. In here. So I have my Van Arsdale KB connector, and all that is a connector out to my Azure Cognitive Service. That cognitive service is continually indexing my Azure SQL database, so I can have a search on that information. From there, I create my custom connection for Van Arsdale KB connector, and then I can go into my app. And being able to do searches and stuff on my knowledge base. There's the KB connector to be able to do search. So that's all it took to be able to add my add a cognitive search into my app at this point to index databases. And again, cognitive search, you could have it searching documents on a file share or a blob storage at that point, and then make that searchable also from within here. I run my app. This gives me that searchable environment to be able to come in and find knowledge bases. So most part is your IT is probably going to have to help your citizen developers to create those connectors or create those connectors in the environment for citizen developers to be able to use. But once out there, you can allow people, you can control who has access to those to be able to use, but then they just can create almost any application they want using those connectors. So you're opening up to the end user, and no longer does IT have to go out and schedule and work on building these applications. You turn it over to end users, and you're actually building the back end systems for those. Any questions on that? And then the last piece that I also did here is just to show is on the appointment system, you need to reserve a part for that appointment. And I actually handled that using a Logic app. So look at my designer here. I set a Logic app to basically be an HTTP endpoint that could be called. So you call this HTTP endpoint, you get the parts, you check to make sure that the part's available. So you compare it against the stock. And then if so, then I go ahead and put a reservation in for that so that nobody else can grab it. And then I send a response back. And then on top of that, so my, I actually go back to my flow on my Logic app. So even on the Logic app is kind of a low code, no code environment within Azure. If you haven't used it, extremely powerful, extremely easy to use, be able to drop components into this. If I wanted to go in, I could add a new component in, add an action. My action, if I wanted to send an email at this point, I can, go out and look for an email component. I can send through Office 365. A lot of times I'll use SendGrid to be able to send an email from within here. You can have these run, this is kicking off as an HTTP endpoint. You can also have different triggers. You can trigger it on a timer. You can trigger it on service bus event, or different triggers, almost like pretty much like an Azure function can also. Any questions on Logic apps? So from here, once I created the Logic app, I actually ran this through my API management also. So you see my Fusion Dev Logic app that I created. Alec, right now I'm wishing I was running a Mac. So the nice thing is from API management, once this loads up, you can actually come in and test from within the API management side. So like my boiler part. Come over here. I actually do a send, and it shows me 200 with what's coming back. So API management gives you the added benefit. You can actually do some testing and stuff within API management. Or you can call it externally from something like Postman or whatever your favorite tool is. From here, it actually did finally come up, but from here I can actually create a power connector. So I can create that API connector for that connects from within my Power App environment for me. Or a lot of times what I do, since they're in different environments, I don't have access from one to the other. I actually export the file as an OpenAPI 2 and then import it in back into my So for my Power App, I go back to my connectors. So there's my ordering connector at that point that I've created. And then I just create a custom, I create the actual connection from that custom connector. It allows me to go back into my application need a part. Say, give me one of those, reserve it, and it comes out and tells me part reserved. That's going out, calling my API management gateway, which then calls my logic app back in to actually go back in and reserve that part for me. So as you kind of saw, one of the main components I used on a lot of this stuff is OpenAPI. Being able to take the OpenAPI, import it into API management, or have API management export my OpenAPI and create the custom connector from that OpenAPI environment JSON. About it. Custom connector. So kind of a whirlwind tour through there, and here's some possible learning opportunities if you want to dive deeper into this. This ebook is basically this application I showed. It walks you through actually creating the OpenAPI, or excuse me, creating the Power App for this, and creating the backend components for it within the Azure environment and wiring this up. So it's a free ebook. It's actually a PDF, a Word doc, or it's even available on the Microsoft Doc site to be able to walk through. Extremely nice. There's actually a learning course available on Microsoft Learn to be able to walk through the concepts of Fusion development. And then for the book, the source code for the API and the app and stuff is available. You still have to wire up the connectors, but it's available out on GitHub to be able to throw that up in the environment. Almost everything you can do with a regular PowerApps license. If you want to do the logic app portion that I just showed, it does take a premium license, which is an added cost at that point for an organization to have a premium PowerApps license. Is there a question?
Hey, Derrick, I have a question. Once you've built these PowerApps, are they only consumable within like Azure? Can you consume these from like a mobile device or web app or something like that? So that way you don't have to give people direct access to like your Azure environment to build these out?
Sure. So on the PowerApp side, let me throw my PowerApp back up. So what I'm in right now on the PowerApp side is the PowerApp portal. So PowerApps has its own portal for being able to do development for the actual applications you're creating. So it's a separate level of authentication on who has access to be able to create those. So just because you have access to the PowerApps front end doesn't mean you can access the Azure portal to do whatever you want on top of it. So there's a separation of that. So if your citizen developer is coming in, or even your IT folks, if they want to create a quick application, they'll do it within the PowerApps portal, and then you actually deploy this. So you may be doing development in a dev portal. You can move it into a production portal, and then grant access who can even access the application from your organization or even outside your organization. And when you create these, the PowerApps environment is available on mobile devices, desktop devices, from the web, so you can access from a multitude of different devices.
All right, sounds good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
then
what about
again,
like?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just say, what about like? Is there anything like authentication, authorization tie-in? Let's say if you have like single sign-on already, or if you want to do authorization, where let's say I want to build a Power App and share it across multiple users, but maybe user A, I don't know, in your example, can view the knowledge base details, but can't view like part details. Is there anything like that? You can restrict access to some or all of it?
Sure. So the PowerApps is Azure Active Directory aware. So when I come in here, it knows who I am based on Azure Active Directory because it's basically running in your Office 365 environment. So when you're calling those backend services, you could authenticate them against Azure Active Directory and be able to control who has access to those backend services, and even your API management service can do that to who has control. The other thing, just an easy thing, if you don't want to dive deep into Azure Active Directory, I mean, on API management, there is, you can basically create products and control who has access to products or individual APIs based on a key. So that if they don't have a key, then they can't access that API either. Or even taking it back in the PowerApps portal, being able to control access on who has access to the connectors, even to create those type of things. So if you want to, not allow a citizen developer to even access maybe cognitive search, you just don't give them the ability to access the cognitive search connector. So there's multiple different layers of security that you can apply in this instance, both the back end and front end.
All right, cool.
Any other questions? I know I kind of whirlwind through this, but I'm hoping to show people that Fusion development is a powerful environment for an organization. Being able to IT can create those backend services. You can concentrate on what your focus is, and then not have to worry about servicing the business front end. If they need an app, then they can go out and create an app based on the services you've exposed. Now, a lot of you might be sitting there thinking, yeah, right, who's ever going to do that? I'm actually working with quite a few different organizations that are doing this today. I have a very large airlines that I'm working with that they had an operations guy that spent 6 months kind of training himself and went out and built application to park planes, basically. So there was a paper process in place that a plane was needed at a gate, or say it was in the day and they needed to move the plane away from a gate into another area. It was a very paper-driven process. And what they did is then they were able to take that. He was able to create a Power App and then launch that out and save the organization a lot of time and money based on that process. So there's a lot of organizations that are starting to look at this and embrace this based on a lot of IT is already out there developing those API backends. Whether it's APIs running in AKS or just app service APIs. A lot of organizations are already creating those APIs today. So this is just exposing them to a tool that organizations can then take and allow the business side to create their own applications and service their own needs.
Is there any sort of governance that you're able to apply from the IT side? So you don't have, I don't know, 1 billion of these just floating around, or is that a concern, or to make sure people aren't doing abusing cognitive services or what have you?
So the nice thing is that the Power App portal, the Power Platform portal, gives you that governance. I mentioned Shadow IT back in the day. Shadow IT, the big issue was lack of governance, lack of control. There was all kinds of people creating access databases, creating Excel reports and stuff that were just residing on the file server. Nobody knew they were out there. Here, they're all in the Power App in the Power Portal. So you control who has access to the Power Portal to create those. You can see the applications within and catalog those applications within the Power Portal, and even be able to run reports on how much they're being used at that point. So the Power Apps portal gives you a great governance tool to begin with to oversee that. And then it also fits into the backend governance. If you're using APIs and stuff on the backend governance from the IT side on, controlling who accesses the resources and putting proper governance in place. Great question, though. Most people don't think about the governance side much. Any other questions? I can always stop the recording if there's any questions you want to ask off the recording.